Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor. This is Sports Daily on Wichita's #1 sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
All right, welcome in, everybody, to another Sports Daily. It's Albracht, it's Castor, it's Chad Chambers producing. Happy Thursday, everybody. Thursday's always fun on the show. What's on tap? We'll have our friend Chelsea Messenger coming in to join us to talk a little betting. We'll also have Tim Fitzgerald, our K-State insider, coming in to chat with us as well. A lot to get to. We had a perfect game in Major League Baseball. It's been more than 10 years since we've had that. Very cool. Travis Kelce in the news yesterday, Tommy. We've got John Sherman talking today as the Royals stink. How are you? Good morning.
I'm good. It's a Thursday. Always a jam-packed show on Thursdays. That tends to be the case every single Thursday. So looking forward to jumping right into it.
All right, let's get into it. I want to tell you also that the IHOP hotline is open, of course, to take your calls at 869-1240. Let's start with Travis Kelce, Tommy. I think that is the most pressing. He does what was it? It was Vanity Fair, I think, that he did.
Yep.
And he said essentially his managers and agents love to tell him how underpaid he is, and it was really amplified when Tyreek Hill went and signed for a 4-year, $120 million extension in Miami. He's like, that's basically 2 to 3 times more than I'm making right now. But then he also says the free agent market looks like fun until you go somewhere and you don't win. I love winning. I love the situation that I'm in. Travis Kelce's underpaid. I think we all know that. I think we've all known that. It's just sort of that like elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we all recognize, what his value is to the Chiefs. And, there have been conversations, I think, going back several years about how really, in theory, he could garner a lot more money, potentially on the free agent market. But I think he's very clear in this interview that he values other things like winning and championships over getting paid right now. And the thing about Travis Kelce is that he's got such a vibrant personality. We saw him host Saturday Night Live and all these other things. He's going to have a big market in front of him when he retires from the NFL in a variety of different ways, whether that's broadcasting or, I don't know, acting. I think he's got an interest in that. According to that interview, there are some things that he can do to make a lot of money when he's done in the NFL. So I think in his mind, his thought process is, you know what? I don't need to cash in right this second. I can make the money that I make right now with the Chiefs. I can win championships, and then I can cash in after I retire.
I hope that people don't take for granted how fortunate it is that Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes are willing to do this in a sense, because otherwise you don't get what you have right now. Let's put this in perspective. So as far as tight ends go, Darren Waller just signed a deal and George Kittle has signed a deal that put them ahead of Kelce, who makes $14.3 million. Okay. That's you're like, oh, okay, well, that's not much of a but we all know that Travis Kelce's not just a tight end, right? If you put him in the wide receiver group, Tommy, Travis Kelce's salary per year, right, slots between Corey Davis and Cortland Sutton. You think Travis Kelce's a better receiver than Corey Davis and Cortland Sutton?
Sure. Well, I mean, without a doubt.
I mean, that's where this really comes into play. Positionally, it's like not that glaring, but when we all know he's the best wide receiver that the Chiefs have and have had, then it's like, okay, yeah, he's severely underpaid, right? He's one of the best that's ever played. He may end up being the best that's ever played. He's great at all of it, and he's the most important thing to your most important player. So it's what was really funny yesterday was to see all the different headlines. So you sent that to me early in the day, and I was like, oh, yeah, okay, I get it. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Otherwise, yeah, we'd have a contract dispute, and we never do. But then as I made my way through the day, I get into TV, and I start to see more of the headlines. Travis Kelce says he's severely underpaid. Like, that's it. That's all you get. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, wait, did I misread that the first time? Like, is he mad about this? So then I had to go back in. I had to look at the whole thing. I'm like, no, I didn't misread this. He was asked a question, and he is, quite frankly. Like, so is there anybody on the planet that doesn't think he's underpaid? So it's interesting. And that's why you hear the chatter still, too, by the way, that the Chiefs will need to take care of him. I think he's got another big extension in him, probably. But there is this very unique and trusting, and maybe it's naive, Tommy, I don't know, but this relationship between Kelce, Mahomes, Andy Reid, and the organization that you just don't get really ever. Think back to the great teams of whenever, right? The Patriots, they didn't have that, man. Well, look at all the drama with Belichick and Brady at the end and who are you going to pay. Like, they made it work. Now, I'm not taking anything away from them because they made it work. And Brady did, offer up discounts in his contracts frequently. Think about the Cowboys dynasty. Was there a dynasty between the Cowboys and the Patriots that I'm forgetting about? I don't think there was. But even then, like, they changed head coaches. It was so dysfunctional, right? And this one's just never dysfunctional. And by the way, it's been lobbed hand grenades to become dysfunctional, and it's just not. And it's really wild to see. And it kind of goes back before Alex Smith, I suppose, to some degree, Tommy, because it was the same way then, right? You never heard about dysfunction. And then, but when I say naive, you had it then, and then Mahomes is drafted and Alex Smith's out the door. So that can change at any point. Of course it can with players. But the fact that it hasn't is pretty remarkable. The fact that they've got two Hall of Fame going to be in the conversation of GOAT at their position players in Mahomes and Kelce, who just don't make a lot of noise about this because, and look, I'm not faulting anybody that does, right? Go make as much as you can because your career is short. It's just a unique group that you almost never get in the NFL. It also happens to take playing at a really high level, or it doesn't work organizationally, but it does here. And you'll have, when this is all said and done, Tommy, will there be any other athlete in the history of Kansas City sports as popular as Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce? I would say no. Even George Brett, even the late Lynn Dawson, rest in peace. Like, all of them, from what I can tell, and I'm not from Kansas City, I'm not from this region, but from what I can tell, there will never probably, and they're not done yet, there will never be more adored players than what's happening with those two right now in Kansas City. And the only way that works is if Travis Kelce's okay being underpaid a little bit, right? Like, because you got to, not that they would make a tough decision with Travis Kelce, but he's right. Like, if he isn't quote unquote underpaid, because he's appropriately paid according to him, so it's fine. But according to the market, he is. If he's not, they probably don't have 2 Super Bowls right now, looking to be a favorite for a third, maybe a fourth. I mean, who knows?
Yeah, I've been following this organization for basically my entire life, and there was a lot of dysfunction before Andy Reid especially came in the door, and then Brett Veach is the GM. I remember the disaster of the 2012 season with Javon Belcher and Romeo Crennel as the interim head coach, and then Todd Haley before that, and Scott Pioli as the GM, and fans flying planes above the stadium, fire Pioli, and wearing bags over their heads. And it was more than just the team was bad. There was significant dysfunction in the organization. And I remember reading an expose a few years ago about, what it was like with Scott Pioli as general manager. And, there were employees that of the organization that, felt like there was going to be retribution for them speaking out, under Scott Pioli. So there was a lot of dysfunction in that organization for a long time. And so the turnaround is remarkable when you have the personalities of, somebody like Andy Reid at the helm as head coach, and Brett Veach and the way that he carries himself as general manager. And then you've got guys like Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce coming in, and it all fits perfectly where they all are rowing the boat in the same direction. They all recognize that if they want to continue this and continue to ride this wave for as long as possible, and I think with Patrick Mahomes, we're talking about another decade plus potentially of riding this wave, they've got to be willing, to put the team before themselves and the organization before themselves. That's what Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce have done basically their entire careers in Kansas City. Not every player on this roster is like that, and very few players in the NFL are like this. They want to go out and make as much money as possible. I don't blame them. I mean, like you mentioned before, all of these guys, it doesn't matter what team you're on or who your player is, who the player is, they want to go and make money, and their careers are short. And so I don't blame them at all. But in the case of Kansas City, what makes it so unique is the fact that the core players, the foundational pieces of this team, by and large, are willing to, put their own personal valuation behind what the team goals are.
I think it's why Andy Reid hasn't retired. It is a special thing that you don't hardly ever get. And look, it could end, and it could end a little messy. I don't think that would surprise anybody at some point. The beauty of it is it's not now. And the beauty of it is both of those guys are playing, and Andy Reid is coaching at the highest level. So there's no, you're not even beginning to think about it, oh, what is it? Now, there are a lot of other difficult things that'll have to happen. Chris Jones, for instance, right? And Chris Jones has been on board, but he's I think when this ultimately gets done, because I think that it will, he'll join that group. I don't know if he'll ever be as popular as those two, but it'd be close. I mean, if he stays and plays it out like these two have, he'll be right there with them. That'll become the group, right? It'll be those three and Andy Reid. And, it's the Eric Bieniemy saga, for better or worse, is behind them. That's not a thing right now anymore. And really, it's sort of smooth sailing. It's just the Chris Jones thing right now. Otherwise,
and by the way, just think about really quickly the number of times. I mean, you've mentioned that there's been the possibility over the years for there to be drama coming in.
Tons.
And for whatever reason, the organization and Mahomes and Kelce, Reid, Veach, all of them kind of swatted away. They don't ever really, buy into it. And that's remarkable. There have been so many different opportunities for any one of them to buy into drama, and I mean, come on, media members left and right. I mean, they're, trying to get paid to do their jobs. So they're going to ask questions, to maybe try to provoke a little bit of drama here and there, because they've got headlines to write, things like that.
Pretty easy on them.
But I also think that,
some of the drama has been
maybe
really
locally
bad. Some of the drama has been really, really bad.
Maybe locally, but nationally, for instance, in Vanity Fair, right? They don't care. They're going to ask, questions about if Travis Kelce feels like he's underpaid. And he could have very easily taken that bait and really dove into it. And I know that people want to, distort the headlines and take it out of context. He didn't say really anything about being disgruntled at all. He could have easily done that.
I don't think it was Vanity Fair. I think it was headline writers, because
You're right.
I read what came out of Vanity Fair, it's well, absolutely, he's the most opposite of disgruntled you could be.
100%. But think about, he could have very easily taken it a different direction, and he didn't take the bait, right?
Right.
And
yeah,
Mahomes always, tries to stay above the fray. Like that's just kind of the way that they are and the way that they operate, where a lot of players in professional sports, like they're going to take the bait, they're going to jump in, and then you've got a lot of drama.
That's an interesting point. Because I think being in Kansas City helps too. Tommy, you've had Andy Reid's son in a really bad situation, right?
Right.
Criminal. You've had Patrick Mahomes' brother accused of a really bad criminal situation. You've had Tyreek Hill at one point accused of a really bad criminal situation. You've had Kareem Hunt in an obscene criminal situation. All of this has happened, right? In this time.
Right.
If this group and team is not in, if it's in, let's say it's the Jets, right? It's just, and I only bring that up because it just like sometimes you sit back and you think about how perfect, relatively speaking, right? I just mean from a team winning games perspective and being, in total unison on the football field. Obviously, these aren't perfect. You would wish that none of this would have happened. But they're in Kansas City. There is the ability in Kansas City for the Chiefs to be, a little more tight-fisted on the media and in what is, circulated around because everybody needs to be covering the Chiefs, right? And everybody's into it and everybody loves them. And you can't, go back and look when the Tyreek Hill thing happened. That was a really strange place. Now that none of that ended up being, charged for anything else, but while it was happening, a strange place. It's just it is so, and just from a fans watching football perspective, the region is so fortunate to have this group together, to have three individuals in Mahomes and Kelsey and Reed that are so focused on it and so incapable of being distracted. Again, just from a football perspective, it's wild. And from all three of their perspectives too, I think they're a nice example of how you handle these types of situations. Andy Reid every once in a while will get a little salty, but Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes almost never overreact to anything unless it's something fun like, the Pat Who stuff and all that.
Yeah.
If it's on the field banter like that, yeah, they have fun with that. But man, if it's anything off the field, whether a contract or whether, legal, they just
and
don't.
Andy Reid, remember, like going back to the whole situation with his son, I think got some criticism for refusing to really talk about it. I mean, I think he briefly brought it up a couple times, or I don't even think he brought it up. I think he was answering a couple of questions, but really was very short about his answers, didn't really dive into it at all and got some criticism for that. But I think in his mind, and I'm not defending any of this, but in his mind, and it's just, it's one of those situations where they feel like all they can control is on the football field, and that's all they're interested in talking about.
It's hard to do, right? It's hard to do. Like, and I get it. That one was a little bit interesting because it happened leaving a team facility. So it did sort of that one got into it where you kind of do need to address this to some degree, right?
And it was right
some of the other
the
stuff
Super
when
Bowl.
It happens. Yeah, some of the other stuff when it happens away, it's like that really isn't, like Patrick Mahomes right now. That has nothing to do with what we're doing here, right? I get it, and it takes a group effort to make that happen, and it is impressive to observe just in that they refuse to be distracted by things. And sometimes those things are really nasty. And sometimes those things are really emotional and all of those things. And I think you have genuine relationships between, people on this team that help you do that. Joe points out that the owner, Clark Hunt, is not like other owners. He's more low-key. I would agree with that. He's not the same type of personality. I don't know that I would call him low-key. I think he's as involved as any owner is in football. The history of his family name and what it means to the league and, the example they set. I think he's very high profile in the business of football. But, yeah, in the off-the-field ego stuff, no, he's not there. And
he's not a Jim Irsay. He's not a Jerry Jones.
Right.
He's
not
had
a lifetime,
right.
to like observe and learn it, as a legacy owner. So it all cut. We sort of took a left turn there, but I just see this with Travis Kelce, and it's like, well, yeah, of course he's okay being underpaid because he is underpaid, and we've never really heard anything about it. When guys are underpaid in sports, we hear about it, right? Because it's an agent's ploy to get them paid. I understand why, but Kelsey's sitting here telling us, yeah, my people tell me that all the time. They love to tell me about it. Why did he say it that way? They love to tell me about it because they want him to get paid more. They can get a bigger commission. That's not what he's interested in. And I think some of it probably has to do with his life after football. But honestly, here's what I love about it. It makes me feel more in tune with a pro athlete because so often we see it and it's, just about the most money, just about the most money, just about the most money. And it creates this perception that it's always about the most money. Well, we don't all live our lives that way, right? Like most people, I think, put happiness over money when it comes to their career, right? We could probably all go make more money if we sacrifice some happiness. So it's this balance that you have to make and decisions that you have to make. That's all Travis Kelce's doing. Like he's always felt like Joe Lunchpail, right? Like
Right.
that's
And on top of that, I mean,
he's just like us.
let's just say that maybe he could go and he could definitely go make more money elsewhere. Let's say it's like a team like the Commanders, or something. We're willing to open up the pocketbook and give him a ton of money, but he's not going to be high profile anymore, at least as high profile as he is in Kansas City. He's not going to be competing. He's not going to be competing for championships, in a place like that. And so I don't blame him. And I think that he's very careful in the wording that he uses in that interview. Of course, it doesn't matter what he says. The headline writers are going to take it out of context. I think it's a non-story. He's clearly not unhappy whatsoever. He's perfectly content with his life, his career, and where things stand in Kansas City.
See, and I don't even think it's a non-story. I think it's just continues the story to me of what makes me sit back and be like, man, this group, like this is so special and unique, and you just don't get it. Like you just don't have this in pro sports anymore. You know where else you had it to some degree, Tommy, was with the Royals there for a minute, but only for what, 2-3 years, right? We're looking at this thing's been going on for a long time now. What are we in, year 6, 7 of this with no end in sight? In football, maybe the hardest sport to do it in. It's crazy, but it's awesome. I mean, if you're a Chiefs fan, it's the best thing ever. It's best news ever. And yeah, he's underpaid. It's all right. They keep winning Super Bowls, and he's setting himself up for a nice long career in the entertainment world after. 869-1240, the IHOP hotline is open. You can chime in on that throughout the show today. When we come back, we'll talk a little betting. We'll bring in our pal Chelsea Messenger, look across the landscape, see if there's any angles to take today and this week. It's Sports Daily. It's Albracht and Castor. We'll be right back.
Oh, okay, take it easy. We're going on the air.
This is Sports Daily on KFH.
On the line is the host of the Daily Tip and Odyssey sports betting insider, Chelsea Messenger. Insider calls are presented by BetMGM. Go check out all of the latest lines today on the BetMGM app. Also, be sure to check out the Daily Tip podcast for more of Chelsea Messenger analysis. Just search BetMGM wherever you find your podcasts.
All right, we welcome in Chelsea Messenger, our betting insider. Chelsea, welcome. How are you this week?
Hey, doing well. You know how it is in the sports world. Kind of the doldrums of summer, but we've got plenty of baseball at least. And also, Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes playing in the match.
Yeah, we got the match coming. Those guys, Travis Kelce in the news a little bit yesterday. Are you looking at the match? Are you thinking about betting the match here this year?
Man, I wish that the odds were a little bit more close to even, but they're not. Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes are big underdogs to Steph Curry and Klay Thompson for a reason. Steph Curry and Klay Thompson are minus 265. This opened at minus 250, and it has moved because we've seen money come in on the Splash Brothers. And here's the thing. It's match play, but it's best ball off the tee. So I would imagine they're probably going to be playing Steph shot probably every time because we know of these four golfers, only one of them is actually a solid golfer. That would be Steph Curry. We know this. And I'm also wondering how seriously Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce are going to take this. Like, I don't see Klay Thompson going out there and, like, acting like it's the Masters either. But still, these are two players that are coming off a Super Bowl run. I think they're going to be having a lot of fun. So I'm not sure if the focus is going to be there. Maybe that's not the correct handicap. But I don't think I would want to put my money on Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes right now.
Yeah, it's one of those things, Chelsea, where, I've watched, these iterations of the match before, and, they're an exhibition. They're having fun. They're doing silly things and screwing around out there and all of that. So I don't really know, I don't know if I'm going to put any money on the actual result or not, but if there are some props out there, and I don't exactly know all the different things that they're going to have going on for the match, but do you think there are some fun things potentially that we could jump into and have some fun with?
I'm sure you could have fun, but I don't have a good handicap for it because I think you would just bet on it for that reason, for fun. So, my job as an analyst, I don't know how much I can give you there. But I will say this is the biggest favorite that we have seen in the history of the match. This is the 8th iteration, and this is, I think, the only time that it's been a favorite of over minus 200. Because I will say favorites have not been the overwhelming winners in this. It's only favorites winning 4 of the last 7. But still, I think this is the most lopsided of all the matches that we've seen thus far.
I get it, and I'm with you, but man, Mahomes and Kelce, I've never seen those guys not compete, though. And, they're going to have, I would imagine, a trash talking advantage, and they're going to know the cameras are on, and they always step up to the big moments. I hope this is fun. I hope they don't just get housed here. I don't think that they will, and I don't even remember how good of golfers they were on the last one. They'll be better beer drinkers. I can guarantee you they'll be better beer drinkers than, and I don't know how that does, because we all know about golf. There's that, what's that handicap, right? When do you hit the sweet spot, and when do you have one too many? That's really the question. Can they keep it in the zone? It's like what, golf and pool, where you have that handicap involved. All right, so we got the match that tees off today. What else is on our mind here? I assume it's baseball heavy for you this week.
Yeah, I got to play on the Royals game at least for you guys. I'm going to go first 5 under 5 runs between the Royals and the Guardians. I was kind of surprised to see this number so high, sitting at 5. It's an alternate total. You can get it over at BetMGM, and keep in mind, it's the first 5 innings. So you are squarely banking on these 2 pitchers. Looking at Shane Bieber, he has not had his normal stuff, but also he gets to face one of the worst offenses in all of baseball, especially in the first 5. Kansas City this season has scored the fewest runs in the first 5 innings of any team in all of baseball. And then on the opposite end, you get the roulette wheel that is Zach Greinke. He has been around for a long time in the big leagues, and he has not had a great June. But here's the thing. In May, he actually had a great season. He had a 2 ERA. But then comes into this month and he has to face 4 straight top 15 offenses: the Marlins, the Angels, the Rays, and the Reds. 3 of those being in the top 10. So I think if he gets a step down in the competition when it comes to offense, I think he can at least be decent here. So I'll do that because the Guardians are not much better in the first 5 innings. They have the 3rd worst offense in the first 5 innings of baseball. So I'll take that first 5 under between the Guardians and the Royals.
So, of course, the big news over the last few days in Major League Baseball, Shohei Ohtani, right? I mean, he's a unicorn. And we were talking about him the other day, and I looked up his odds to win the AL MVP. And at the time, I don't know if it's changed, but it was like minus 1,000 for Shohei Ohtani to win the AL MVP. So, more than likely, I mean, barring some sort of epic collapse, which I don't see happening, I mean, he's a lock and a shoe-in for the AL MVP. Are there other ways that you can look at Shohei Ohtani, either on a game-by-game basis or a futures bet, that would give you better value for him?
The only advice I would give is that Ohtani actually is really good on the days that he's pitching, which is kind of odd because you would think, okay, on the days he's pitching, maybe he's not as focused at the plate. But, I mean, this guy's been unstoppable on just about any day, but especially on the days that he's been pitching. So maybe a total bases prop on the days that he is pitching for him to have a good day at the plate. And also, the market really hasn't changed too much for the Angels when the name Ohtani is involved. Like, if he is the starting pitcher, they're not always huge favorites. Like, in the past couple of weeks, it's changed a little bit, but you can still get the Angels in the first 5, like minus a half at a decent price. The way he's pitching, and also the Angels have one of the best offenses in baseball, especially in the first 5. They are scoring the 4th most runs in the first 5 innings of any team in all of baseball. So playing the Angels in the first 5 innings, even when Ohtani is pitching, usually you're laying a bigger price, but still, it's usually a solid play.
So he's so strange in this. And like, is he going to totally ruin futures bets, like preseason MVP futures bets in Major League Baseball and the American League? Like, how could you bet anybody else while he's playing?
Well, going into the season, we didn't know he was going to be this good. Like, we knew he was good, but I think what's totally mind-blowing is not only is he doing something that no other player in baseball is doing, but he's doing it the best of anybody. Like, isn't he still leading the majors in home runs? That's bananas. Isn't he still, throwing 10 strikeouts? It feels like every other week. So it's not just the fact that he's doing it, but like, this is the best season I think that he's had since coming to the major leagues over here in the States. So I don't think anybody saw this coming. His numbers that he's putting up right now are otherworldly. So I think you could have made a case for somebody else to start the season, just to say maybe Ohtani gets hurt, maybe something happens, because that's always the case. We see it with, big players all the time. Remember that season where Jacob deGrom had Bob Gibson numbers and then he got hurt for the rest of the year, which seems to be the story every season. So things can happen. But you're right. He has an argument going for him that nobody else in baseball has right now. But he's a two-way player.
Well, you mentioned the matchup between the Royals and the Guardians with Shane Bieber and Zach Greinke. There's several other veterans on the bump for tonight's games. Joe Musgrove for the Padres is pitching, Lance Lynn for the White Sox. And then, of course, you get into Adrian Hauser and Max Scherzer, Brewers and Mets. I'm looking, though, one of my potential bets for tonight, and I don't know why I feel this way, because the Cardinals have not had a good season at all. And Adam Wainwright's ERA is really high, but he's a crafty veteran. They're at home against the Astros. For some reason, I like him tonight in that matchup. Do you have any sort of sense, or what are you thinking with the Cardinals and Astros tonight?
Oh, you want to back Adam Wainwright tonight?
I'm thinking about it.
Because
I'm thinking about it.
I don't think I'm going to go with you on that one. It feels like Adam Wainwright has kind of reached the end of his rope. And you're right. He is a crafty veteran. Maybe he gets things going here, but it's not been a great stretch for him. He's been all right, but the other factor here is the Cardinals have been very underwhelming so far this season. So when you're betting on a team, not only are you betting on a player, you're also betting on the offense and the team behind him. And it just hasn't really been there for the Cardinals, one of the more disappointing teams in all of baseball sitting in last place in their division. And as favorites, they haven't been good either, even though they're short underdogs in this one, I should say. As underdogs this year, 14-17. Meanwhile, the Astros come in much better as favorites, 29-25. I think JP France is actually having the much better season here. So I'm sorry, I'm not going to go with you on Adam Wainwright. I'll take the Astros in the first 5.
Okay, so let's look at Rangers Tigers here. And this is interesting because the Rangers would be heavy favorites in general, right? But they're minus 175 today, which isn't a tremendous disadvantage. But they've got a guy named Cody Bradford on the mound who none of us have ever heard of. That provides the value, but it is this Rangers offense against Reese Olson in the Tigers. Whenever you got a great team with maybe, it's a spot like this where they don't have one of their traditional starters in there, it's a heavy. Do you take advantage of that ever when you're just kind of betting on their offense to outscore them a little bit?
I think when you have somebody in the equation that you don't know that much about, and I'll say this about Bradford for the Rangers, it's been 3 straight losses, for the Rangers when he is starting. So I think you go from there. Yes, I think you can make a great argument saying, hey, the Rangers, one of the best offenses in baseball. I think they still have the best run differential in all of baseball. But still, I think you want as few sabotage factors as possible when you are banking on a bet. So if there is something that, I can't quite pin down, it's like that with me and Lance Lynn. Because Lance Lynn, I feel like, has run more than any other pitcher in baseball. Because every time I expect him to be good, maybe he's coming off a game with a ton of strikeouts. And he is a strikeout pitcher, but I think he only has a couple pitches. So sometimes I'll bank on him to be good. He'll be terrible. And then I'll bank on him to be bad. And he comes out and has a great outing. So when you have somebody who's volatile like that, I don't think those are pitchers or teams that you want to back when there's just too much variation.
Chelsea, I want to go back to golf here really quickly. The Rocket Mortgage Classic underway this weekend. Anybody that stands out to you that you're looking at potentially maybe making the top 10 or top 20? I know Ricky Fowler has kind of had a resurgence over the last couple of weeks. Colin Morikawa is at the top of the leaderboard right now, early on day number 1. Anybody that you're looking at or backing for this weekend?
Yeah, I'll go with Ricky Fowler here. He is sponsored by Rocket Mortgage, so obviously they would love to see him do well here. But it's not just a recent resurgence. It's been this whole year. He has 13 top 20s in this golf season dating back to September. So I think Ricky's playing great golf. I think he has found his putting stroke for the most part. I'm not going to bet him to win outright, but I do like a top 20 bet for Ricky Fowler. I do believe that is minus 110. I don't love playing minus money bets in golf for top 20s, but I do think that it warrants here just because it's not an especially stacked field. This is not an elevated event. A lot of the big names are taking this one off. We don't have Scotty Scheffler. We don't have John Rahm. It's Ricky Fowler. It's Tony Finau. Justin Thomas, who is very volatile. We were just talking about people I don't like to bet on. He's kind of one of those. But also I'll say this about tournaments like this where we might see a final score that's like minus 25. I think these type of tournaments are more wide open to guys who are not normally at the top of the leaderboard because it's not a difficult course. And so I think that these are tougher to bet on because it's more wide open. So I think now is the time to probably take a look further down if there is an underdog or somebody that normally is not in the mix that you think is playing well. Now is probably the time to bet on him. But for me, I'm going to stick with Ricky Fowler here. The recent play has been great. And plus, he's somebody you just want to root for anyway. So I'll be rooting with Ricky Fowler this weekend with my money and also with my heart.
All right, Chelsea, before we let you go, I got one bet to make today, only one. Is it that Royals first 5 or is it something else?
I like the Royals first 5, under 5. And also, I will be taking the Astros in the first 5. I believe it's minus 110, maybe minus 115. It's pretty close to a pick 'em. Like I said, the Cardinals have just been really untrustworthy this season. Also, I kind of like the over in the White Sox and the Angels game. But you heard what I said about Lance Lynn. He always burns me. So that is the sabotage factor. But the Angels have really been hitting the ball lately. So have the White Sox. The bats heated up last night. I think we see some better numbers there. And plus, the White Sox get to face a lefty today in Patrick Sandoval. Traditionally, White Sox have a lot of power hitters that are right-handed. So I think they should be able to scratch off some runs against Sandoval. But again, Lance Lynn always burns me. I should probably stay away.
Hey, Chelsea,
All right,
real quick.
Chelsea.
Real
Oh, go
quick,
ahead,
I want to point out. So I forgot to mention this earlier. A week ago, when you were on the show, we were talking about the Royals and Rays matchup and about how the Royals were these massive underdogs at like plus 300. Shane McClanahan was on the bump for the Rays. I went opposite of you. I actually took the Royals at plus 300 just because those odds were so juicy. McClanahan left the game. The Royals won. Baseball is weird.
I said that.
Yeah, no, she was on the Royals.
I thought you were on the Rays. I thought you were like Shane McClanahan, is going to, obviously he's an ace.
No, that was me.
I think I was on his earned runs. I think I was on his earned runs prop, which lost by a run, but I definitely was not on the Rays because I think that was my argument. It's just that the worst team in baseball, can beat the best team in baseball on any given day. Yeah. So you deserve your flowers for sure.
Well, thank you.
Chelsea, Tommy sent me the message that said he made the bet, and I totally jinked. I was like, McClanahan is going to shred them, and I should have known at that point he was a lock to win it. Jinx is on me. My bad. My bad if you had the Rays that day. All right, Chelsea. Chelsea, we appreciate it. Let's do it again next week.
All right. See you guys.
That was the host of the Daily Tip and Odyssey Sports Betting Insider, Chelsea Messenger. Insider calls are presented by BetMGM. Go check out all the latest lines today on the BetMGM app. John Sherman talking to the media today about the Royals. We'll get some early returns on that conversation when we come back. All right, welcome back, everybody. It is Sports Daily on KFH. Tommy, John Sherman talking today. Is he saying anything interesting?
I'll tell you right now, we're going to need more time than just this short segment to digest everything that he's talked about. So maybe in the second hour, I don't know. I think it's a waste of time for him to meet with the media. Here's a couple cliff notes of some of the things that he said. He says he has total confidence in Matt Quatrero and JJ Piccolo to turn things around. That was in one sentence. And then a little bit later, he said that the results are worse than what they expected for this season. So I'm not really sure how to reconcile those two statements together. But those were a couple of things he said. He also said that in reference to the potential new stadium for the Royals, and this is his quote, he says, "This is the most important thing we'll have the opportunity to do while we're stewards of this franchise." So he's saying that that's the most important thing for the franchise is a brand new stadium. I'm not sure how many people agree with that. I certainly don't agree with that as the most important thing. It might be an important thing, but I don't know if it's the most important thing. I would think maybe, I don't know, winning some baseball games and being a contender again, that might be the most important thing. But what do I know?
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you on that. Let's win some baseball games before we start talking about that kind of stuff. Okay, we'll get into that.
What a joke.
In the second hour. Real quick, want to tell you that Odyssey and KEYN bring you Concerts in the Park, sponsored by IHOP. Free live music, 8 to 10, Andover Central Park at the Capitol Federal Amphitheater, which is at 1607 East Central Avenue in Andover this Friday. It's Annie Up. Bring your lawn chairs, blankets, extra cash for the food trucks. No coolers allowed. Gates will open at 6:30. Coming up right after the break, we'll have Tim Fitzgerald join us, our K-State insider. Jerome Tang had to cancel a speaking engagement in Wichita tonight. We'll find out why, who might be on the hook there to have to do that. We'll do it next with Fitz on Sports Daily.
Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor. This is Sports Daily on Wichita's #1 sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
He's got all the insight on what you want to know and maybe some of what you don't want to know. Here's K-State insider Tim Fitzgerald.
All right, welcome back in, everybody. It's Sports Daily here on KFH. Glad to be here with you. Glad to be here for another hour. Joining us on the IHOP hotline right now is Tim Fitzgerald, our K-State insider. Fitz, what's up, man?
How are you doing?
Oh, you know.
You good?
How are you doing?
I'm wonderful. Supposed to be kind of nasty weather today, but I'm wonderful.
All right, Fitz. So Jerome Tang had to cancel his speaking engagement in Wichita tonight. Is this a Joe Toussaint visit that made this, or maybe is there movement on Javon Quinterly? What's going on there in Manhattan?
I think the first one's right, because his visit got moved back because our airport is closed in Manhattan, and there was a problem with his flight getting into Kansas City. We're redoing the runway here in Manhattan. I'm a big fan of functional runways if I'm flying. I think that's probably it. They've got a couple West Virginia guys that are coming in this time period, and they're kind of zeroed in on those guys to finish off the roster.
Yeah, what are those guys? I mean, I know Joe Toussaint is one of them. What sort of attributes could they bring to this roster? Obviously, a veteran presence, continuing to bolster that for Coach Tang. But what sort of things does Jerome Tang see in a guy like Joe Toussaint?
Well, he's after another veteran guard, and he wants the best athlete available, probably more of a big guy if he can. And these guys fit that. And so, and both of the players coming in from West Virginia are New York kids. So that's interesting in itself after what just took place last year with Marquise Noel. So it's all very, very interesting to me that this is, kind of coming together this way. And in light of the fact that now a K-State guys taking over West Virginia is trying to hang on to those players. So it's an interesting situation.
Is anybody, how many roster spots do they have, Fitz, still left on there?
Two to go. And they're trying to work through that and, get it filled out. But, there's still some players out there. I feel bad if, someone like West Virginia is losing players at this point. We'll see if that means that, they can backfill with other quality players. I'm just not quite sure what's all out there right now.
I think Bob Huggins got a transfer, since he's been let go. I think they still landed a player, which is interesting. I don't know either. I just want to know, Is there an impact, is there a difference maker out there for K-State that they'd still be interested in here?
I don't see one right now in terms of, Keontae Johnson. Maybe that pops up here in the next week or so. They feel really good about their roster that they can compete. I think Jerome Tang told me on my Life of Fitz podcast, they feel like they've got a roster that gets them to the tournament, but that's not what he wants. He wants a roster with the depth that you can get to the Final Four, and they're aiming for Phoenix. And so if you look back at the roster they built in year one, a guy like Desi Sills, we didn't think much of it. We thought it was a good addition, but we didn't realize he'd be such an important part of the mix that got them to the Elite Eight. And, there's a number of guys like that. David Gasson, another example, came in from Virginia Tech without real good numbers and ended up being a crucial contributor and starter for this team. So those are the kind of pieces they're looking for, guys that have an upside that haven't quite been met yet.
All right, Fitz, I know that you've been busy on social media over the last few days talking KU.
What?
Yeah, I know. It's shocking, right? Talking KU stadium project and all of that financing. And I'm going to be honest. I'm kind of an idiot, and I don't really understand the way that a lot of this works. And I know we've talked about it before, but where do things stand right now? What are you looking at as far as like the issues in your mind with the financing and where the money's coming from for this potential new stadium for KU?
Right. So here's my hang up, and people are misconstruing it quite a bit. First of all, I love the project. The project's really cool. In fact, I want K-State to put an amphitheater in. I think that's something that this generation really would love to have, outdoor music and outdoor events. My base problem with the project is it's two projects that they've lumped in one budget, because I feel like any kind of athletic department related facility projects should stand separately from the rest of the university. And I feel like they're crossing two streams with one budget. And as much as people tell me, well, it is two different things. There's no government funding going to the football project. I'm like, well, that's fine, and just separate them. That's all I want is, to make sure that any kind of athletic department renovations like that are coming out of their revenues or their donors. This is a massive project they're doing, and I think they've just crossed streams. They've kind of clouded the funding of everything, because they do have around $85 million of taxpayer money already given to them in grants for the project. And as much as they say none of that's going towards football, not according to the budget, it's just one budget. I mean, there's no way to separate those two out. All I want is to separate the budgets and know that they're paying for their athletic department renovations to their own funding means, like Kansas State and many other schools do. You're making $100 million in revenue at minimum now in the Big 12, basically, a year. You should be able to pay for your own renovations out of that budget and out of donor money. And Kansas State has built enormous facilities, incredible projects over the last 10 years without a dime of student, state, or university funding involved, outside of getting bonds, which are, you have got to repay those as essentially a loan. None of it has been long-term funding, permanent funding from taxpayers, and I think that's the way it should be.
Yeah, I agree. It just where it's always hard too, because like, where do you draw the line? And you're trying to like show it as a benefit to the whole state, and is it a benefit to the whole state? I'm not sure. Is it a benefit to just part of the state? I don't know. This stadium funding stuff, it always gets weird to me. I would like for everybody to pay for their own stuff, right? Like, it's not like we get to see the benefit of the money that stadium's going to bring in, right? Unless you're, I suppose, a KU student. But how about if the students help pay for the stadium, they get a tuition discount or something? It's just a weird thing.
Yeah, I agree. My other discomfort, even though I think it's a cool part of this project, is they're going to build an enormous hotel with a convention center, and I'm uneasy about building something with state funding or taxpayer funding in part that's going to compete with local business. I'm not comfortable with that. I'm unclear about the ownership and operation of those other facilities, the hotel in particular. But I know there's a hotel just, within view of the football stadium that'll be competing as a private business. So, that's something for their local Chamber of Commerce and taxpayers to work out. But I don't really want to see any kind of funding for a football stadium from taxpayers in any form, whether it's federal, what some of these grants are, or Kansas in particular. It's just odd that they have to fall back on that if that's necessary. One said, "Well, this is going to be a $300 million project," and my response was, "Well, I'm pretty sure Kansas State's done $300 million worth of work on their football stadium since its opening. They've just done it as time progressed. They haven't let it fall apart." And, that's really the issue here. Is that it's just falling apart. The stadium is in disarray.
All right, now you've made the peanut gallery mad. That's good.
It's trash day, guys. Always fall on trash day.
In your mind, Fitz, I guess my follow-up to that, just from you being around K-State and now looking at what KU is doing with their football program, is this, in your mind, kind of a desperation Hail Mary for KU when, in a world of conference realignment and all of this, trying to find whatever means necessary to get a new stadium done to stay competitive in the Big 12, as far as like when you were looking at potentially going somewhere else, or conferences changing and evolving and all of that? Is this kind of a Hail Mary in your mind?
Well, it's that they've let it get to the point now where it's a serious problem, and there are some comparisons, at least in terms of how the facilities rank with peers between KU now and Kansas State when Bill Snyder arrived, and the commitment of the Veneer family to help turn that around. But all that context is exactly right. You can't be falling behind in football and basketball facilities in the way you handle your programs in this current environment. And they're worth so much money. I mean, it's how you make your money now. $40 million a year as of 2022, going from the Big 12 into your budget. Take care of business. Another pushback I've heard, which is absurd, that people don't want KU to upgrade their football stadium. No, we actually really do. It's kind of embarrassing for the conference, and it'd be a better experience for everyone involved if it was renovated. They just let it go on too long, and now it's gotten very expensive, and it's a huge project, but it's very necessary. And if we keep hearing about all the major donors they have at KU, it's time to pony up. But the problem is the natural instinct of donors at Kansas, and it was this way with football at Kansas State for a while, is, well, I only want to give money to the nationally prominent sport, which at KU is basketball, and they have a basketball project going on also to rival this one, which I think is awkward also.
Yeah. Well, it's gonna. I don't know. You'll see the blow. I think it's a non. The stadium's gonna get built, and we'll see how it's done. Let's talk K-State football. Fitz, what is what's out there right now? I mean, we're through the workouts. We're sort of in that moment. Anything that has stood out to you guys, either in a good way or maybe a concerning way, from what we've seen in the very early work of what will be next season?
No, I mean, I think they're on track. They feel good about things. Will Howard just got back from the Manning throwing camp or whatever it is. And I think this team feels really good about itself. I think they're confident. They've been, from all accounts, getting after it all summer long with workouts. I think they feel good. Now we've entered, I think, a dead period of football recruiting right now, but one of the prominent players in the state of Kansas, Caden Massey, down in Linden, is going to announce tonight. So I think it's between Kansas State and Nebraska. So that's an interesting story to follow. We don't know when the linebacker out of Junction City, Michael Boganowski, is going to announce, but we feel like it's in the next couple of weeks, and that sounds like it's K-State and Oklahoma, although the NIL's involved, so someone could roar in at any moment if they, come with the right price. So just some interesting happenings on the recruiting front in a year in the state of Kansas where the top talent's really good, but it's not nearly as deep in talent in this class as it was last year. So they're valuable commodities if you can get some of the good guys.
It's hard to believe, Fitz. We're only a couple of weeks away from Big 12 Media Days. And of course, it's, a big new look for the conference with, the new teams joining, new schools, part of the conference. What are you expecting, at least from K-State, or maybe even just conference wide, as we get into Media Day?
Media Days is going to be chaos. I mean,
yeah,
it's kind of funny. They announced originally the plan would be all 14 schools would be there on both days. None of us could envision how that was possible. And sure enough, we got the schedule, and it's 7 on the first day and 7 on the second day. Kansas State goes or opens up the second day. It's going to be fun for me. New colleagues in the media circles, new contacts to make, and this is always important for every football program. Media days, but this is going to be important for media people too. The networking involved, from my aspect, for podcasts and just information. So it's going to be chaotic down there. I mean, they're doing an afternoon with 7 teams and a morning with 7 teams, and then you're out. And it's just going to be utter chaos and just so much information in a short period of time. If they get to 16, they're going to have to go back to 3 days. There's just no way to do it in 2, I would think.
It's coming soon. It'll be here before we know it, and then we'll be in football season. I can't believe it's almost July. And we watch that deadline tomorrow for San Diego State. I don't know what's going to happen there. But it's June 30th, and I don't think the Mountain West is very pleased, and San Diego State's got a decision to make. Anything else there, Fitz, before we let you go? Any other rumblings or rumors with the Pac-12 and a deal or anything?
I mean, apparently they have a deal. The rumors, they've shared it with their members. And at worst, they feel like they might lose Colorado and Arizona to the Big 12. But I'm guessing he's going to push that announcement of the deal back as far tomorrow as possible to put these schools in a bind to give their notice and get out before the end of the day. I think he's just playing a shell game now with his own members, trying to force them to stay, which is, maybe good business on his part, but also, for the Pac-12, that's also kind of shady and difficult to imagine doing that to your own partners if they don't think that financing of this media deal is in their best interest.
All right. Well, we'll keep an eye on it. Fitz, gopowercat.com, at Life of Fitz on Twitter. We appreciate it. Get the dogs in line there, and we'll talk again next week.
I think they keep me in line. But anyhow, good to talk to you guys.
That's true. All right. We'll do it again. There goes Tim Fitzgerald. Maybe some conference realignment news to chat with next week. We're going to take a quick break. The IHOP hotline is open, 869-1240. God, it is almost July. Odyssey's teaming with the city of Wichita, the Wichita Parks Foundation, Riverfront Stadium, and the Wichita Wind Surge to bring you Red, White, and Boom. July 4th at Riverfront Stadium. Entries free. Gates open at 6. Riverfront's concessions will be open. Plus, you can enjoy food trucks on the Hyatt lawn. Watch the Surge play in Tulsa on the Jumbotron, and then stay for the fireworks. You probably start hearing those every night here pretty quick. We're going to take a quick break. More on John Sherman's chat today with the media and the Royals. That's coming up next. All right. Welcome back, everybody. Sports Daily here on KFH. It's Albracht and Castor. Our appreciation to Chelsea Messenger and Tim Fitzgerald for joining us here on the program today. Tommy John Sherman getting in front of the firing squad today. What do we think here? So far, for me, it's been like nothing that I wouldn't expect. The vote of no confidence, vote of confidence in that I have confidence in the GM and manager, which usually means there is no confidence, and that's almost certainly a precursor to you better watch your back. I feel like historically in these types of scenarios. And then the other thing you have brought up was the fact that he said the most important thing for this franchise is getting a ballpark downtown, which you don't agree with. I certainly don't agree with that either. It is just not true. The most important thing for the franchise is to win games. Now, those things aren't mutually exclusive, but unfortunately at the moment they are. And unfortunately for John Sherman at the moment, he inherited, because, you know, this is the team he bought, a team that's not ready to win yet. and there's no path forward. And that's just a part of the reality. But I can guarantee you something fans don't really want to talk about right now as a new downtown ballpark. They want to talk about how this team starts to win more games again.
Yeah, and I feel like, and I kind of had an indication, like I had this thought in my mind that it was going to be this way with the press conference with John Sherman last night, that, the Royals get blown out 14-1 at home against the Guardians. The Guardians are not a great baseball team. They're run-of-the-mill average this season, and they get blown out last night. They're 22-58, and I had this idea that John Sherman was going to stand up in front of the media and push a new ballpark. And that was primarily going to be the reason for him to meet with the media. Wasn't going to be talking about concrete plans on how to turn the team around, on how to figure out, the best way to construct a roster moving forward, or talk about the coaching staff or the front office or any of that. He briefly mentioned Matt Quatrero and JJ Piccolo. He briefly mentioned that he has full confidence in them, but that the expectations are, it's not good, and that the results are worse than what they expected. Briefly mentioned it, but he spent the lion's share of his time talking about this stadium deal. Like that, he's preoccupied with that. And there's no indication from him that there's any kind of plan moving forward to turn this franchise around and to make them a more successful team on the field. And that's, in a nutshell, I think, if the buck stops with him as the owner, that's a huge problem right then and there.
They have a lot of problems right now and no fast solutions to any of them. And if we were in year, 2 or 3 of this, right, it would be a different story than it is right now, which is the fact that this has been happening for a really long time. And it doesn't matter that that's not John Sherman's fault. It's John Sherman's problem right now. And even if you're working behind the scenes on this stadium, you're just not going to get any momentum behind it while the team is playing like this.
Right.
So you had the World Series in 2015, then 81 wins, then 80, right? When they tried to stretch that window. Since then, since 2018, you've had 58, 59, 26 in the shortened season, 74, 65, and who knows how many wins this year. So in the years of stinking, you've already had 5. You're in the middle of your 6th. And there's no light at the end of the tunnel. So what's it going to be? 9 years of this?
Right.
Bill, you can build this stadium and nobody's going to come because nobody's going to pay big money to go watch that. You're better off trying to get people to come to the cheaper alternative right now while your team stinks.
I can't think of, anybody, any Royals fan that has any sort of passion or drive to support this team having any kind of appetite to entertain a new ballpark right now. None. In fact, the majority of Royals fans that I've talked to and that I know of have said Kauffman Stadium is fine. Like, yeah, it's not, the state of the art anymore. And eventually there may need to be something. But right now, that's the least of our worries about a ballpark. It's so much more important for the fans in their mind to have at least some kind of concrete plan in turning around their fortunes. And the fact that the owner of the Royals shows up and meets with the media and only wants to talk about pushing a brand new stadium and says that the most important thing while they are stewards of the franchise is to build a new stadium completely misses the mark. He said he didn't say it's one of the most important things. He said it's the most important thing as owner of the Royals to build a new stadium. And that couldn't be any more off base. The most important thing as the owner of this team is to put a team together that can actually be competitive. That's the most important thing. It's not to build a new stadium in downtown or in Clay County or somewhere else.
That might be the most important thing to his business, right? Like
exactly.
That might be his business's most important thing, but it's not the most important thing to the fans. And you got to know the difference in those two things.
Yep.
And what people care about. You're just not going to create the buzz you need to create. Like, why do this? Because you can't be that out of touch. Like, now's not the time for this.
Yep.
And I know that you have a timeline and things you're trying to work through. Get up there and say the things that he has said, like, this is my fault. We're going to have accountability. I hate this. But then also say, hey, listen, we know we're trying to build a new stadium at the same time as this. Not good timing. But here's what I'll tell you. We are going to aggressively pursue the free agent market and spend money. Doesn't make sense to do that right now. I think everybody understands that. But very soon, and when the time comes, I will commit right now to having a payroll that's at least at league average. That's what I'll tell you to the fans today. Get on board with me for that when the time comes, and let's all together get this stadium downtown so that we can do all. I don't know, but like, what are you committing to outside of saying, yeah, this is my fault? I have confidence that, like, what? Okay, what's the solution then?
I don't know. I mean, I'm at a loss, just like you are.
That's the problem. There is no solution that happens quickly, which means there may not be a solution, at least in sight now, for what you want to do with this stadium.
But I can tell you that the solution is not to try to throw all your eggs in a basket of a new stadium right this second. Like, no, read the room, man. Like, understand the way that the fan base and, any of the stakeholders, where they're at right now. And it's so, I'm just going to call it disrespectful. It's disrespectful to the people who care deeply about this franchise and have been waiting around for years and years and years and years to even have a shred of relevance. It's been so long since the Royals have even been relevant, and all the fan base has heard, all we've heard for years is we're doing everything we can to turn it around. We're rebuilding it. We're doing all these different things, and none of it has worked. And instead of, with a new owner and a new GM and a new manager, instead of putting together another plan to try to find a way to turn it around and make it work, where the fan base could then say, okay, I can get behind that. They're making moves. They're going to be aggressive in free agency. They're going to try to spend some money on players. They're going to do all these different things to try to make the franchise better. Instead, it's, John Sherman throwing all of his eggs in the basket of building a new stadium. Like, that is going to magically solve all the problems. Newsflash, John Sherman, that's not going to solve all the problems. And if you've got the citizens of Jackson County or Clay County, wherever the stadium ends up, and they're spending their tax dollars to finance a new stadium for you and this pet project of yours, and the team is still abysmal when they move into it, that's going to be the largest mistake. And it could end up dooming this franchise forever if there is no improvement with the product on the field, but yet there's a brand new state-of-the-art ballpark that nobody goes to. That could doom the franchise forever.
They're not doomed forever if they spend money in free agency. I just don't know, like, and I don't think there's an answer to, like, here's how you convince fans that you'll do that, because it's not always the smartest thing to do that. And sometimes it can even hold you back, as it sort of did right after the World Series. But you have to be able to define a clear path, right? Like, here is the path that I have right now as an owner to winning. First of all, you made the changes that you needed to make because none of these draft picks are panning out, right? All the early draft capital that comes with being this bad, like, none of them outside of Bobby Witt Jr. have really panned out at this point. So you have to acknowledge that. And you have to have accountability, which I think he's trying to. And then you have to lay the path forward. So what is the path? There's no quick path other than either starting over in a lot of senses or committing to being a player in free agency. And that's a really hard thing to say and do because it may not work out in each individual season. it's the problem that the Royals face. It's why this is so frustrating. I mean, I get it. And John Sherman's not going to be able to get up there and say anything that makes anybody feel any better, because the reality is this is year 6 of this, and they're not any closer than they were in year 1 of this. They may be further away, in fact.
But you know what?
So
you say that there's nothing that John Sherman could say that would make anybody feel better. I disagree with that. If John Sherman stepped into that press conference and said, you know what, everybody, we're midway through the season and it has been worse than we expected. It's been very important to me and to my business and my pocketbook to build a new stadium downtown or in Clay County or wherever. And that's really where I put a lot of my time and my resources and my effort. That stops right now. Until we make this team better, I'm fully committed to not spending any more time trying to build a new stadium. And I'm fully focused on working with the front office in turning this team around. And once this team is relevant again, then we can open up that project again and we can go forward with that. In my mind, had he done something like that,
yeah,
I would absolutely be like, let's go.
That's
let's go.
Totally out of touch. I mean, business doesn't work.
How is that out of touch?
Because it's
not out of touch at all.
It's not true. How are you going to fund the stadium is is the conversation. Say that I'm going to pay for the stadium, right? Like, I'm not going to ask you to pay for the stadium. I'm going to pay.
I'm just saying, like, we're going to table this for right now.
You can't table it because I don't know what are the tax laws? Like, what is the legislation needed? What's the timeline? Like, you can't just stop business. Like, you can't do that.
Can. And you know what? When I look back to this, the same thing happened with the football stadium at the University of Kansas. You know how many times over 10 or 15 years they've started and stopped that project? Like, they would go out, they would try to gauge the appetite of the donor base. I know it's different from college to professionals, but they would go out, they would try to gauge support for it. They would announce that we're doing this and there would be renderings and whatever. And then it would just be like, actually, there's really not the appetite, to go forward with this. And I guarantee you right now in Kansas City, if John Sherman were to do major polling throughout the entire metro, there would not be an appetite for taxpayers with the way that this team is performing on the field to be subsidizing a brand new stadium. I don't care where it is. So at that point, if I'm John Sherman, I get it. Like, it's not good for my business, but it's going to buy me a lot of goodwill with the entire community if I say, we're just going to table this for right now because we're going to be fully committed to get this team back to relevance. And then we'll open up the discussion about a new stadium.
It's not a discussion about a new stadium anymore. The new stadium is coming, right? It's how does it get paid for is the discussion. There really is no tabling. Either you do it or you don't. And the reality is the timeline of that, other than finding the funding, doesn't have a whole lot to do with what's happened. It's not going to deter anything that, I mean, they'll either put a bad team on the field at Kauffman or a bad team on the field downtown, right? It's not that. It's how are you expecting to get taxpayers behind this investment if the ineptitude is there to put a winning team on the field, right? Like, you have to be able to put a winning team on the field for our desire, or even not even desire, but like, okay, fine, with a new downtown ballpark. Downtown ballparks, like, there's politicians involved, there's landowners involved. Like, you can't really just stop that progress if you've made that progress. But what you can do is throw people a bone in trying to remain competitive. And you know what? Maybe that means overspending in free agency on short 1 to 2 year deals for a couple years, just to say, we are doing everything that we can to give you a winner right now, while, because I do think those two things doing? The reality is those two things are completely separate. What happens on the field and building a new ballpark, outside of fan interest, I just mean like getting a downtown ballpark done from a business end doesn't have a whole lot to do with the product on the field, other than the fact that you're asking taxpayers to foot some of the bill.
You also just said that you build a brand new, beautiful ballpark. Nobody's going to show up to it. That's business.
Totally.
So those two things are interconnected.
Totally will. But, as somebody who built a business in July of 2021, then saw the cost of that rise, I don't remember what it was now, somewhere between 30 and 40% 6 months later. Like there are too many factors in play to just say, you know what, let's just wait, right? Like there are things happening now in motion that you can't really go back from and just say, okay, stop. But you have to stop what's happening on the field. And that's the challenge. And that's why, again, like it doesn't, John Sherman just doesn't need to get up and lecture people on why they need a new stadium right now. The optics of that are terrible. Just continue with your progress because it's not like people are going to vote on this. Probably. No, it's going to go down to elected officials because if they throw this thing up to a vote, he's screwed anyway. He might be screwed if they're a great baseball team.
Oh, I think it's going to come down to a vote.
Taxpayers to vote for a stadium.
I think it will come down to a vote. I think it's going to be a sales tax increase vote, and whether
I don't think historically with sports stadiums, this is ever voted on. I don't think it gets voted on.
I mean, I'd have to go back and look at his quotes from the press conference this morning. I think he was talking about dates of when this could potentially be on a ballot. Like, I think this is going to be a voted on process depending on.
Then he's going to lose anyway.
Agreed. Right. And the fact that and again, I want to go back to the amount of time he spent on it versus the amount of time of, hey, look, I'm going to work with Piccolo and Quatrero and we're going to do everything that we can, and here's kind of a plan that we have in place to address the fact that we have, lower than, expected win totals. And we're not playing good baseball right now. And the trade deadline is coming up. And so we have, X, Y, and Z in place to try to he didn't spend any time on that at all. He just said, I take responsibility for it. I believe in Quatrero and Piccolo. Things are worse than we expected. Okay, now let's talk about a stadium. Newsflash, John Sherman, nobody gives a care. Nobody cares. Nobody cares about this new stadium right now. They don't care. They care about the fact that their team is 22-58. They care about the fact that this team has a terrible pitching staff and the young stars are not developing. And it's largely the same team as it was a year ago, and the results are worse. Like, that's what they care about. They don't care about this being on a ballot. They don't.
Well, we'll have to look at it, and this will go to Missouri and not Kansas, so I'm just not familiar with it. But I'm just trying to look historically. Yeah, like the public vote is skated by politicians because teams and politicians know that the public, generally speaking, one, voting for a tax increase is a fool's errand, and two, like it almost never happens that way, right? Especially on these massive projects. So I don't know how that's going to work. I don't know the details of that. If they're going to have to vote it in, it's not going to happen. It just won't. It might not. Again, it might not if this was 2016, Tommy, it might not happen because it's just people don't vote for tax increases typically.
So this is according to the press conference. Sherman says that they're looking at April for a sales tax extension vote in Jackson County. That's what they're looking at right now. A vote in the month of April to extend a sales tax in that county. And so I don't know if that's a vote for like the commissioners of the county or if that's a vote for the taxpayers. I don't know how that works.
Yeah, I don't either. And it's a hard thing because, then it becomes into the debate of do these stadiums ever pay for themselves and are they ever worth it? I think the Vikings have already paid off their new stadium. So clearly it was worth it there, I think, if you can already get it paid off. It's one of those things where, and Wichita dealt with it on a much, 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 much smaller scale with Riverfront and Intrust Bank Arena. And like at some point you're trying to increase the, from a city's perspective, like this makes our city more attractive. It brings, people into the city. It brings businesses in who then want to recruit people. We've heard it time and time again. And it's not our problem here in Wichita. It's not. It has, quite frankly, not a whole lot to do with us. Unless, and then it gets into the sort of that thing with the Chiefs. Like, what if Missouri continues to turn this down and the Royals are like, you know what? Maybe we'll go to Kansas. And then for the state of Kansas, it's like, yeah, maybe we should do that because that then becomes a driver. So it gets a little complicated. But the reality is you just have to win baseball games. Regardless of whether you're putting a new stadium in or you're going to play at Kauffman, you can't have 6 years of a rebuild and a start from scratch moment. And John Sherman made his changes in the front office and things got worse. So, yeah, he should be accountable. I don't know how things got worse, but they got worse.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I'm wildly disappointed with this press conference today.
Well, it was nothing. What was he going to say that would have made you happy? I mean, there's not really.
Well, I kind of spelled it out. I mean, obviously,
I
that's
know,
not
but
going to happen. But I think that there were things that he could have said, or at least spent more time focusing on the product on the field, which is what everybody cares about. And I don't know the entire breakdown of the length of time that this press conference happened and the amount of time he spent on the team and the amount of time he spent on the stadium. But I guarantee you that those two things, like I would have loved to see more time on the actual team and the dedication to turning it around as opposed to pushing this pet project that benefits his pocketbook.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't listen. I'd love to see him pay for the stadium himself. And then I don't care. Do whatever you want, right? I generally feel that way. And we're seeing it in the NFL. These ownership groups are starting to say, I'll just build the stadium myself. That's what needs to happen. Because that's how everybody else operates. That's not true totally. The businesses get tax breaks and tax incentives all the time. But you got to justify it, right? You got to sell people on it. And that's what he's trying to do. It's just the timing is bad. But better off not say anything at all, I think. 869-1240 is the IHOP hotline. You can weigh in. We'll come back another segment here on Sports Daily.
The commercials are over.
Yo, I haven't got all day.
869-1240.
Time to get busy.
This is Sports Daily on KFH.
Welcome back, everybody. Sports Daily on KFH. Jackson County is where it is now. I think the vote coming is for Jackson County extension of what already exists, which the Royals, I believe, in the very beginning said would pay for this. Like nothing changing. They just keep it going. So maybe it's as simple as that, because then I think the Chiefs can continue to benefit from that or whatever. I don't know. It's Missouri politics. I'm not totally aware, so forgive me for that. Tommy, it's like 1 billion degrees outside yesterday and today. Let's give some people some free iced tea from HTO in the spirit of the sun. We'll give that. These will be good for East or West. We'll do 2 free tea cards, more than 25 flavors of iced tea. You can get your hands on a couple of those. Jad will get us a winner right now, 869-1240. Get some tea for you and a friend and beat the heat today. I mean, what do you even do when it's this hot outside? And it's not too bad right now. But
try to just stay inside and not do a whole lot. We had our air conditioner.
Did we fear the heat when we were growing up? Did we fear the heat like we sort of fear the heat now? I mean, for me here, it's more like it wasn't humid at home. So when add the humidity, so it is. I do fear it more than I used to, certainly because of the humidity. But I do I don't know.
I notice it more. I notice it more, and I don't know about fearing it, but I notice it more now than I did like when I was a kid. But I lived my life at the pool when I was a kid, like every day for hours, and so I never really picked up on it. And now that I don't get to go to the pool. I absolutely notice it more.
And well, we're also old. We notice everything more now.
Yeah.
Our naivety goes in the toilet. But I will the humidity, the difference between heat here and heat growing up in essentially the desert is staggering. Like I grew up where it kind of feels like a blow dryer is on high, just aimed at your face constantly. Whereas here, it's like you're under hot water somehow and you can't escape it. And I'm a sweater and I'm a head sweater. And my wife makes fun of me constantly. I get out of the shower sweating, like my head sweats like crazy. So I wear like headbands and stuff, which also she's not as impressed with as she should be. But yeah, it's like my body is not inclined to this heat and humidity. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, we've had our air conditioner obviously working on high. I know everybody's is right now, and the fans are going throughout the house, and that poor air conditioner is trying to keep up as best as it can. But it happens, occasionally every single summer. Hopefully, I mean, it sounds like today's the final day, like a quick 2-day stretch of this, and then it's going to cool off. And hopefully we don't have like major intense heat for the rest of the summer. But of course, you get into late July, early August, it typically happens.
Yeah, and it will. It always happens, and we'll get to the pool as often as we can. We'll be all right. Eric can cool off with some iced tea from HTO. Congratulations to Eric for that giveaway winner. We'll come back. We'll tell you what's on tap the rest of the day. That's next on Sports Daily. All right, everybody, that does it for us. We're going to get to Jim Rome at 11 and then early Royals baseball today at 1 o'clock against the Guardians. Let's see what John Sherman thinks of the game today.
Good luck.
But it is trade deadline time, so there are a lot of eyes on the Royals and what they're doing right now. A lot of important things happening on the field because it will impact what they're able to do at the trade deadline. Our appreciation to Chelsea Messenger, Tim Fitzgerald. If you missed either of those interviews, you can go back on the Odyssey app and listen for free. Tommy's out tomorrow. Paul will be back in with me. For Jad Chambers and Tommy, I'm Jacob. We'll see you then.